Eile told us Noach, these are the generations of Noach. That's how it's usually translated, but the word told us bears several different translations. Sometimes told us indeed means offspring. We have a parsha in Bereshis called Told Us, and it's Eile told us Yitzchak, and it's all about Yaakov and Esav. So it can mean offspring come from the word laholid. In Ivrit, Toldot just means history. Toldot Am Yisrael means Jewish history. Toldot Yemei HaBeinayim means medieval history. So Toldot bears several different meanings, but it can also mean the general impact that a person leaves in this world, the legacy that you leave in this world. What have you really achieved in this world? That's how Rashi gives us a very profound insight at the very beginning of the parsha. Rashi says, Ika Toldoteim Shel Tzadikim Ma'asim Tovim. In other words, even though Noach had descendants, and who had more descendants than Noach? Who are the descendants of Noach, incidentally? The answer is everybody. The whole of mankind are B'nai Noach, because according to the Torah narrative, Noach starts the whole of mankind again. And therefore, everybody... Nevertheless, the Pasuk says, Eile told us Noach, and does not proceed to tell us about his offspring. It says, Noach ish tzadik tomim. The fact that he managed to maintain himself as a tzaddik tomim and to preserve his emunah and preserve his values and preserve his Torah life to the extent that he could, that was something of an immense achievement. In actual fact, Chazal tell us that Noach survived the spiritual dangers, not just of one generation, but of 3 generations. He lived through the generation of Enosh, which was the beginning of paganism and a loss of belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then the Dor HaMabul, which was a generation of corruption, of violence, and of immorality, and then there was the Dor HaFlaga, which was the building of Tower of Babel, which was, for lack of a better word, the deterioration of fascism, that everybody who disagrees with us, we're going to execute. Right? These were the three great spiritual disasters that took place during his life, and he managed to maintain himself as an ish tzaddik tomim, and that was a tremendous achievement. However, he was at the same time he was a survivor, if you like, who wasn't sucked into all these different disasters, spiritually speaking, but he was unable to build the future. That was left to Avraham Avinu. To appreciate this fully, maybe it's worth reading just one paragraph in the writings of the Rambam. A masterpiece of the Rambam is Hilchos Deus, where he speaks in chapter 6 about the fact that human nature is hardwired to be influenced by their surroundings. He says, Derek Brioso Shel Odom, it's part of human nature, lios nimshach, to be pulled in by Reo v'Chaveirov, by your surrounding society, and follow their deos, follow their views, and dress like they dress, and speak like they speak, and adopt all their views. And people who think that they can mix freely with an atheistic or corrupt or promiscuous society and not be influenced by them, they're playing a very, very difficult, dangerous game, says the Rambam. One has to choose one's friends very carefully, choose one's environment very carefully. He's got a whole chapter about this, which is very fascinating. If you read that chapter, you come to appreciate Noach a little bit better. That Noach was able, against enormous pressures of all these generations that were going on around him, this tremendous spiritual spiral of degeneration that was happening around him, he managed to maintain himself as a tzaddik tomim, and this was one of his great achievements. And the model, in fact, of a Tevas Noach has remained throughout history as the ability to build strongholds which can defend themselves against the prevailing winds of spiritual disaster. In fact, the Haredi yeshivas were built in the 19th century and were regularly referred to as a Tevas Noach, preserving Torah values and Torah life in a Europe which was being completely flooded and swept by secularism, Marxism, communism, Bundism, secular Zionism, all the isms that were determined and were successful in undermining 90% of the Jewish people of Europe. Places like Odessa and Krakow and Lublin and Frankfurt and Berlin, which were strongholds of Jewish life, were like 90% affected by this secularization, and therefore the yeshivas were built and referred to regularly as a Tevas Noach to preserve Torah values under these circumstances. If one understands that properly, you get a bit of an insight into the mentality of the Haredi yeshiva world, which is not willing to participate in the secular world in any way whatsoever, because that was the original, this was the DNA of the Haredi yeshiva world. More about that some other time. Anyhow, this is Tevas Noach, and Noach, of course, also has the great, if you like, criticism leveled at him, that even though he survived, as I've just now described, he was unable to influence anybody. He wasn't able to have a following. Avram has a nefesh asher osu b'choron. Avram vayikra b'shem Hashem, he goes out and spreads the light. Noach, for some reason, was not able to do this, and this was really a criticism of his. In fact, the Chasam Sofer says that the 12 months that Noach and his family spent in the Teva was an onesh for them, was a punishment for them, that they had not succeeded in spreading the light. Because simply to be a tzaddik and not influence and not go out there to teach, that is not the derech. In fact, the Pasuk says, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Noach to go into the Teva, the Pasuk says, Bo ata b'chol beischa Teva, you must come into the Teva, ki oscha ro'isi tzaddik lefonai badar hazeh. Because I've seen you are the tzaddik who's worthy of being saved, and one thinks that the Pasuk is praising Noach. Right? Since you are the tzaddik, you deserve to be praised. But Chasam Sofer says, you should come into the Teva. Why? Because you're the only one on planet Earth who's worthy of being saved. And why is that? Because you failed as a mechanech, you failed as a mashpia, you failed to convince anybody, and therefore you are going to go for 12 months into the Teva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have saved Noach in lots of different ways. He didn't need to spend 12 months as a zookeeper, which must have been a terrible tsar for him. Nevertheless, this was a punishment for him, says the Chasam Sofer. I'd like to end off simply on one small tefillah that we are all saying at the moment, which has hidden meaning to it. Two beautiful hidden meanings to these 4 words that we've all started saying in our regular tefillah, which is Mashiv HaRuach u'Moirid HaGoshen. On the face of it, a very simple tefillah, which the Mishnah speaks about in Maseches Tanis, right? Gevuras Geshamim, that we mention the fact that part of the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that he brings the rains and the winds to this world in order to fertilize the land and to create a world which can be lived in. There are 2 very interesting points here which I want to bring to you. One of them is a Ritva. And the Ritva is one of the Rishonim, in the beginning of Maseches Tainus. He asked an interesting question. The bracha of Tchias HaMeisim is about the resurrection of the dead after Yemos HaMashiach. It's about bringing people back to life again. What has that got to do with rainfall? So he says, no, you misunderstand. Rainfall gives us the ideal moshel, the ideal template for the neshama. Why is that? Because the neshama comes down, me'olam ha'elyon, from the shamayim, comes down into this world and mixes with the guf, and the guf is made from earth, from the offer min ha'adama, and together, the earth begins to flourish, and it grows and develops, and then it evaporates, it goes back up again to shamayim, but then it comes back down again. The water cycle, says the Ritva, is our best image for the journey of every neshama in this world. And if you reflect on that, you'll understand Tchias HaMeisim a little bit better. And I think that's I think it's a very beautiful insight that when we're speaking about Tchias HaMeisim, we think about the water cycle as a material sort of image of how that worked. The second one is a line from the Bnei Yissaschar, which I think is very, very beautiful. Mashiv Ruach HaMoed HaGoshem speaks about the wind and the rain. But in Lashon HaKodesh, Ruach and Goshem also means Ruchnius and Gashmius. In our world, and everybody's world, there is Gashmius, there are the material needs and pursuits and desires that we all have. And then there is the Ruchnius, there's the spiritual inspiration. Now we are now in Cheshvan. And we've had a Tishri of, we've heard the sound of the shofar, we've had the sound of midnight slichas, we've had the chazan and Ne'ilah and Kol Nidre, and we've had the songs, we've had moments of inspiration and uplift, and that is the ruchnius for the year. And we're davening for Mashiv HaRuach, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should restore to us the ruchnius that we've experienced, lahashiv et zeh, to bring it back and keep it with us permanently, u'morid HaGoshem, and help us to to in some way diminish our involvement in materialistic pursuits and to keep them under control. And I think that's a very beautiful kavanah to have, and Halavai HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us to be Mashiv Haruach Hamorid HaGoshem in all these senses, that the neshama should indeed be encouraged, be understood, to be on a journey in the most beautiful sense, and that indeed the Ruchnius of Tishri should be with us for the whole year, the V'chein Yehi Ratzon.